Everybody, welcome to UGASports Live. My name is Roddy DeBulsi. I'm joined by Trent Smallwood and Dane Young. Coach Donnan is off. He's going to have some family coming into town, so he's getting ready for that. So we hope to have him next week. We're going to pepper Coach Donnan with some questions about the future of the team. And, he's very optimistic, but he's also a realist, and he will tell us exactly how things are. I remember him telling me midway through the seasons, we got to get better in the run game. We got to get better in our coverage, and he was right. He said it on the Watch Along show. Crazy numbers for our Watch Along show as Georgia took on Notre Dame. You guys, hundreds of thousands of people, it seemed like, joining you to watch the Watch Along. Not exactly how we wanted that game to play out, but we can discuss that later. I think the most pressing thing right now, and the reason we have Trent on tonight, is because the transfer portal has been crazy. And now I'm old enough to remember, Trent, about 2 weeks ago, seeing all the tweets, all the text, all the message board posts about how Georgia's the only team in the SEC who hasn't signed a transfer. What the hell's Mark Richt doing? What the hell's Kirby Smart doing? It's like the Mark Richt era, just being reactionary instead of leading. And I'm like, that's a low blow. That's you call Kirby Smart reactionary, Jesus, But it's just that kind of that woe is me mentality. And I kept saying, look at who you just signed. You've got one of the best signing classes. It's the schools that don't sign well that have to go hard in the portal. But hey, now they've signed a bunch of them. They could sign for even more. So let me get your overall thoughts on the transfer portal. Then we'll hit some of these kids.
Well, I remember talking to you on the way home from you were on the way home from New Orleans, and we talked about, we wonder if this changes a little bit of mentality about Kirby Smart moving forward. And then the next day you see Zachariah Branch. then you see the other wide receiver, name slipped my mind.
Noah Thomas.
Yeah, you see them go out and yeah, is Georgia willing to spend the NIL money on wide receivers? And because it hasn't in the past, and all of a sudden you start landing two big name guys in the portal, which I think they were probably two top three receivers remaining at the time. So yeah, it's funny how everything works out, because you watch Georgia's game the other night and you're like, there's got to be some kind of change, and a lot of people was calling for different stuff, but most of all, what stood out was Georgia's got to have wide receivers that can catch the ball. And I think you land a slot receiver, you're losing Dom, you land your slot receiver, you land your X guy that you didn't have this year, especially when Colby Young left, and it allows Dylan Bell, which announced he's coming back, to move into a more comfortable spot and not be that X guy, not be that go-to guy. He was good last year when he's not, that main guy, that X guy, and then you can do different stuff with him. You can play him in the slot. You can play him at running back. You can do different things with him and not have to be kind of as a go-to guy. So I think Georgia did a lot of good things. Then you go land three safeties, and I think that was one of those things where, like, God, they're losing Dan Jackson, they're losing Malachi Starks. You got KJ Bolden coming back, but who's going to fill the holes? Then Kirby said, well, I'm going to go land three. Surely we can find one that can play out of those. So you might see, one at star, but you got Aguero coming back who could probably play safety or star. So you're just adding depth, and I think that's the main thing. You're adding competition, you're adding depth, and I think he did a great job bringing those guys in.
Dane, I'll tell you the behind the scenes stuff that happened on that phone call when I'm leaving New Orleans, head back to Georgia. I get a hold of Trent, probably to make him do something. I don't even remember the reason I called him, but I told him, hey, I've been speaking to some folks, who give money, and they're frustrated with how this went down, but not as much as the program itself. And the program's reaching out to these people who have given a ton of money already. They went out to the people who have already given and said, can you give more? We have to do something. And sure enough, we hadn't heard hide nor hair of Zachariah Branch or Zion Branch. We knew that James Coley had recruited Noah Thomas to Texas A&M, but we weren't sure what was going to happen there. And, 24 hours later, 48 hours later, they basically got them both. The guys, the safeties you're talking about. Heck, today they got Dylan Bell's little brother. He's a fast kid. Went to Notre Dame as a DB. Went to Vandy to switch to offense. He's coming to Georgia to play offense. They got Jaden Harris. They even got a kid from my hometown. He went to Heritage, but that's okay. Adrian Maddox. I can tell you he's tough. If you grow up on 138, you're tough as hell. And he's a good-looking DB. So they went out, and it wasn't – I know people will say, you got bargain basement guys. Like, they didn't spend a ton of money to get London Humphreys last year. They didn't spend a ton of money on Colby Young and guys like that. But I can tell you that some of these branch guys were getting very good offers. Noah Thomas got some really good offers. Now all of a sudden it feels like Georgia's willing to wade in. I'm not going to say it's top dollar, not the most, but competitive.
I mean, when you look at which position historically, and it's a short history, but that which position has Georgia been most active in the transfer portal, it's been wide receiver. Dom Lovett, Ra Thomas, Colby Young, Lawrence Cager. It goes London Humphreys, Michael Jackson. And it really hasn't worked out to anything to this point that has been massive for Georgia. And part of the problem is it's not quality enough talent. I mean, again, Michael Jackson transferred into Georgia, wasn't good enough to play. Now he's transferred out of Georgia with barely having played. I don't think that was a surprise, but it was also, why are they doing this? Is it really just a depth piece there? And so when people come, we have people on the board all the time, especially after James Coley was the offensive coordinator and that year's offense was not very good. Why do you bring James Coley back? Well, look at the receiver room a year after he's been back. Like, that guy's connections are crazy. And for him to do what he did in recruiting true freshmen and then also do this in the portal with the aid of the donors you're talking about, Roddy, that's how you quickly turn over a position group. And when I see Georgia doing that much work at wide receiver and, like Trent's saying, at safety, that tells me even with the attrition at offensive line that I know we're going to talk about, Georgia's not quite as concerned about that.
Yeah, and to your point, that freshman room, Trent, when I first came back from ESPN and took over the site, you were one of the first guys I brought on. Have we seen a freshman wide receiver class like this?
Not a complete one. I think you've seen bits and pieces here and there. You saw that, like they were very high on A.D. Mitchell, bringing him in, and he was the lower ranked guy. But you had the George Pickens, but I think there was only 3 in that class. But as a whole, you brought in 5 solid guys in this class, and you haven't seen that, in many years. I can't recall one.
And I mean, Sokovie White and Nitro Tuggle are practically freshmen still.
Yep. So I mean, you basically got seven youngsters, and you don't really have. You got Dylan Bell, but who other than, I guess you list London Humphreys at this point as an upper class, but who else? I mean, that room's slim now. It's those 2 guys and
Cole Spear.
Pierce Sperlin, yeah. I mean, not Pierce Sperlin. What'd you
Cole
say?
Spear. I said Cole Spear.
But yeah, that room is very young, and you added some guys that come in and play immediately, and those guys kind of learn up under them. And I think C.J. Wiley, learning up under Noah Thomas, I mean, I think that's perfect for him.
Brilliant, yeah.
And also, bringing in Talon Taylor to learn up under Zachary Branch. And I mean, just those guys. I think Talon Taylor can play anywhere, not just slot. I think he can play several other spots. But they need that leadership. They need that guidance. And I know coaches are out there to coach, but they're also learning from these upperclassmen. And I think you brought in some key pieces for that.
And you can't say that freshmen can't contribute at a position like wide receiver anymore. Not with what we're seeing with Jeremiah Smith, which I know is different. Not with what we're seeing with Ryan Williams and
he's 17.
Texas. Yeah. Is he? This is news to me.
And he played baseball with David Pollock.
When he was 12.
Little League. You're right. So those guys can have an impact. I'm excited about Georgia's wide receiver group. And, they did try to bring in some good guys, but it felt like that room was snake bit. And a lot of people say, well, why do you have so many drops? I can tell you James Coley coach. We've seen him as a wide receivers coach. We've seen him as a tight ends coach. We've seen him as offensive coordinator. His guys don't drop balls. They were just – this year was an odd year. I go back to when Ladd McConkey had a series of drops, and then, he got over it. Now he's killed it in the NFL. It's a cyclical thing, almost like the yips. It'll go away. And Coley's in there. He's got a bunch of new guys. And you just to speak of the snake bit, Colby Young is not out there. Ra Thomas is not out there. Those are two guys who could have had a huge year for Georgia. So,
and you got to think guys like Arian Smith were forced into the amount of snaps that they played because of Ra. And because Arian Smith had drops problems before Coley got here. So it's not just this year. And now you just upped his his targets and his snaps, and Dylan Bell and Arian Smith haven't played the amount of snaps that they played each and every game this year, and whether it's fatigue having something to do with it, or I just don't think they were forced into roles that they're not those type of guys.
And I don't think people want to get on Dylan Bell. We can go back to that game. He had an awful drop. They still scored on that drive, but my point is that's a guy who. He's not the one we point to all the time and say, look at his drops. But that's what we remember. We remember a big drop in a big game. Ask Terrence Edwards, Georgia's last 1,000-yard receiver. Half the people remember that. The other half remember one drop. And I'm like, man, this guy saved your ass so many times, and you still want to bring that up. It's stuff like that takes me off. But very excited about that. I guess a lot of people want to know who else are they going to add. Are they going to add an offensive lineman? Are they going to add a defensive lineman? A lot of defensive guys going to the NFL. You want to see some help on the O-line, even though you've got 97 guys who haven't played yet. They want to see maybe somebody at quarterback. So what are we thinking? How many more additions do we see? Or do we see any of them before spring?
I think at wide receiver, you're good. I think at safety, you're good. I think with ETN coming back, that kind of eliminates Georgia taking a running back. I could see Georgia going after. I think they need to go after an edge, because you lose Damon Wilson, you lose Mapimba, you lose all those guys, and that room's very slim now. So I think you need to go after an edge and an offensive lineman. And I think Georgia's future at offensive lineman is. I know you saw a lot of inside guys go. Bobo got a lot of snaps this past year. I was at a basketball game last night. I happened to be in Athens, sitting next to Daniel Calhoun, and that dude is massive.
Big boy.
And sitting next to Malachi Tolliver and all those guys. So,
big boy.
But I think interior-wise, I think Georgia's going to be fine. I think at tackle, what does Georgia do at tackle? And I think Georgia has some guys, sitting there that you brought in 6'11", old crazy guy, and
Jackson
game last night too. But you brought. You got him, and you got several other guys. But what do you do? What's your plans? I think the most important thing. What's your plan, officer? What's your plan with Ernest Green? Is Ernest Green a tackle moving forward? Is Ernest Green moving inside? What is your plan with him? What's your I think Freeling played great into that last game. I think I think that's where, especially pass pro, I think that's where the you always go off the last thing you saw. And he had some good games, and then he had a bad game. And so what's his future? Is his future, are you looking at him as a left tackle? Are you looking at him as maybe the future right tackle? So I think a lot has to do with what your plans are and what you want to take in the portal. I think they need to add offensive linemen, but what position-wise, I think a lot depends on what their plans are with Freeling and Ernest Green.
See, my fear there is you signed 6 offensive linemen last year. You played one, the guy who hadn't played the entirety of high school. Jazir Jackson played, nobody else. Then you signed 5 more this year. You've got plenty of guys there. I'm not saying don't bring in a proven guy. If you can get TJ Shanahan, sure. Absolutely. They saw Elijah Bridges going to Nebraska, so he's not in the mix, although he was from Columbus, was very close.
Going to protect Patrick Mahomes Jr.
Yeah. But it's just I feel like you've got guys lined up who are ready to come in. We've been hearing about Daniel Calhoun, how good he is. We've heard about Jamal Merriweather and how good he's going to be. Are you not developing them? Are they not ready? I mean, I get the 5 you just signed are true freshmen. They won't be ready. But those guys that kind of redshirted this year, go with them. But you can't wait. And that's the thing. When you get the transfer portal, I mean, you got to win next year.
Yeah.
You got to win now.
And I think a lot depends on what their how do they feel in that room? How do they feel about Jackson's development? With him coming up, not playing high school or not playing football in high school, how is his development going? Do they feel like he can contribute next year? Because if they don't, then it's a little different story. Merriweather, I think, he's very athletic. I think he can contribute, but is he ready to contribute? And I think you got to have guys, they got to have some confidence that they got 4 guys in that tackle room that are ready to contribute. And if they don't, then maybe you need to go to the portal. But if you're confident in 4 guys contributing next year, maybe you don't. So
you got to replace 4 practically. And again, Ernest Green could still go pro.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a bad idea, but it's still possible. We could still see some defections to the NFL. They're not done. Today we saw Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins put his name in there. That was expected. At least I expected him to. I mean, guy's been here 4 years. He almost left after year 1. I think he's graduated. He's done with school.
He probably played his best year at football. I mean, he better put his best film out this year.
Yeah. So I could see him, but you could also see a couple other guys put their name in who haven't yet. But if Ernest Green
just going pro, like the deadline has passed for players to enter the portal for this cycle because it's more than 5 days after Georgia's last game. But more of these players will enter the portal after the spring season, especially after the roster shakes out. We see this every single year. And Trent, you mentioned that like Georgia won't have to take a running back. I'd be surprised if all these running backs are still on the roster by the summer, just because you look at those freshmen that came in last year. Are they going to look at that depth chart and say, I can break through there? Is Roger Robinson going to look at that and say, yeah, I'll have plenty of playing time with Etienne and Nate Frazier? I don't know the answers to all those things and how dedicated some of these guys are. Branson Robinson has dealt with all these injuries. Does that feel more like an Andrew Paul situation where it's been such a tough road injury-wise that maybe I just need a fresh start? We don't know, and we'll find out this summer after a spring, which will be Josh Crawford's second in that room. And so maybe there's a little bit more maturity, because to me, that's the biggest question, Roddy. Why couldn't Georgia run the football this year? And all the offensive issues seem to center around that one question.
Yeah, I wrote an entire soliloquy on the board saying, here's my thought. Last year, or coming into this year, I'm like, they got 4 returning guys. You got a first-round draft pick at left tackle. You got a 7th-year senior at right tackle. You have 3 guards for 2 spots, any of which could start anywhere. Tate Ratledge, Micah Morris, Dylan Fairchild, they could start anywhere. So you got 1 extra. And then we saw them. They actually worked, with all 3 of them. One of them at center, thinking, okay, put your best 5 on the field. And then Jared Wilson comes in, and all we heard about was this is the fastest offensive lineman Georgia's had in decades. He's so fast. He can run as fast as the tight ends. This is going to be interesting. And, okay, you have 2 running backs get hurt. That's rough. But you have a superstar freshman in Nate Frazier, and you bring in Trevor Etienne. I'm thinking, okay, decent blocking tight ends, not great blocking tight ends. Lawson Lucky can block. Oscar Delp can at times. But, you should be able to at least – 3rd and 1, you should be able to get a yard. They couldn't. Many times they couldn't. Couldn't get push. Good in pass pro, but not, Carson Beck didn't get lit up a whole lot. They pass protected, but they couldn't run the ball. And it was just kind of surprising to me. So my knee-jerk reaction to all this changeover in the offensive line was, now you only got 1 guy who's your starter. You lost basically 4 with Dylan Fairchild going to the draft, which I thought was a little premature. But
yeah, were y'all surprised about really Fairchild and Wilson going pro?
Yeah, they both shocked me. I was like, I thought they.
I was expecting guys like Etienne. I thought Etienne and Dalen Everett were 2 that were sold to go, and and Etienne's coming back, and we haven't heard from Dalen yet. So
yeah, we could hear it while the show's going on. You never know. I'll finish that thought. My knee-jerk reaction was, okay, you returned 4 and couldn't run it. Now maybe you bring in 4 new guys. Not to say Ernest Green would be a new guy, but let's just say that he does decide to go pro or he moves positions, you're basically returning everybody on that starting group except Monroe Freeling. And he got pulled after giving up a couple sacks. I'm like, just burn it all down, rebuild it, and maybe it'll work better. And so then I got into the whole. Some people were saying, well, it's obviously coaching, and I'm like, that's not what this past year was. You would have a situation where you have 5 offensive linemen. Everybody would grade out well on 67 out of 68 snaps. On one snap, they would have a miss, a whiff, not pick up a stunt, not hit their guy when they pull, not pick up the most dangerous man on the end of the line, whatever it was, inside zone, stepping on somebody, and that would be a 3rd and 3, or that would be a 4th and 1, or that would be, trying to get inside the goal line, or even you had Dylan Fairchild and Tate Ratledge both jumped against Notre Dame. Illegal procedure calls on 2 of your leaders. This shouldn't happen. And it wasn't always on the same play. So you'd have 5 guys who would all have one mistake each at 5 different points in the game. But the rest of the time, they were fine. And it would be those 5 critical times. And I'm just like, this just doesn't make sense. And they know better. Tate Ratledge knows not to jump. Dylan Fairchild does it. They know how to pick up a block. And also, there's support guys. Guy goes in motion. He's supposed to pick up the cornerback and block him, and he doesn't. Tight end misses a block. Running back hits the wrong hole. To whatever it was, they could not run it. They couldn't get it together, and it's tough to put a finger on exactly what it was. So what people will do is go, well, it's coaching. And I'm afraid that is a catch-all because to me there was a lot of times it was execution. Little column A, little column B. And Trent, Dane, I don't know how you fix it. But my thought was, hell, maybe if you're just starting over, burning it all down.
I think the frustrating part is with the running game is you got 2 home run hitters back there.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 guys that
run it all the time.
And it was there was so many times this year where I was like, God, if they were just one block away from taking it, one block away from taking it, one block away from taking it, and all was somebody missing a block on that time, or somebody not getting to the second level. So it was frustrating to watch because you got two outstanding running backs. I mean, Nate Frazier, and I said going into next year, as long as those 2 return, they should be 1A and 1B, and they should be getting split carries because you should have them on. You should find ways to get them on the field together because they're so good. I mean, ETN catches the ball so good out of the backfield, and Nate Frazier improved in that area, and Nate Frazier is, I mean, just watching his burst and his motor in that Notre Dame game when he got in the game, it's just those 2 guys together are unreal tandem. If you can just get some blocking up front or get them all on the same page, I think that's the main thing. Getting them all on the same page, you got 2 home run hitters. You could they could take it to the house anytime. You saw that Notre Dame running back take it to the house 90-something yards against Indiana, 98 yards. You got 2 guys in your backfield that can do it at any time. You just couldn't never generate. I don't know what their longest run of the year was. It couldn't have been more than about 20 yards. I know the majority of the year, the 3 longest runs of the year were from wide receivers. So it's definitely frustrating to win that way.
And this group of receivers was as weak as I can remember under Kirby Smart at blocking, and especially edge blocking, because in previous years, we've seen Ladd McConkey get in there against the linebacker or even a defensive end in some cases, going back to Jason Stanley, Marcus Rosemy-Jackson. To me, where the coaching issue, Roddy, you're going to have missed blocks and you're going to have people get moved in the wrong way. I mean, it's a fast game and there's good athletes all over the field. That's going to happen. But in the case where Trevor Etienne has the fumble down in the red zone against Notre Dame, Anthony Evans has no business being assigned that job of trying to block a player at the edge from coming down and blitzing on Trevor Etienne.
But they run it with that. They run it with the motion guy. The motion guy makes that block all the time.
But he is nowhere. You want to do that? Do it with Arian Smith. He's a better football player. He's a much better blocker too.
Don't throw to Nitro, who hadn't played in 2 weeks. I don't know rotation issues. That is different. But to me, the scheme was sound.
I think he was.
Stacey Searles, why you let your guy get hit? I'm like, that wasn't Stacey Searles' fault. I'll blame him about a bunch of other stuff, but not that. And then later on, it would be the illegal procedure. Later on, it would be, hey, who didn't pick up that stunt? Hey, Monroe Freeling, you've been playing great, and you had cement shoes and let your quarterback get strip sacked. Come on, man. So it's always a different guy. And it was on defense. I can point to number 7 and go, hey, there's your weak link. That's who they're going after.
Okay, but I guess my point, so in Monroe Freeling's case, who would you put there that's better served at that role for that job? Probably can't find one that you can absolutely say is better. I can point at 2 or 3 guys and say they're better than what they had Anthony Evans trying to do in that play.
Like I said, we can change rotation, but to me, it's not the scheme. That's an execution issue.
It's a personnel issue to me.
Yeah.
It's not the play's fine.
Do your job.
Well, they had a personnel issue at wide receiver all year. So
yeah, that's very true. Very, very true. All right. Want to mention our friends over at Athens Ford real fast because there are some fantastic deals that you need to check out. We're in January 8th, 2025. There are a lot of 2024s that they would like to get off their lot. You get $16,000 off an Ford F-150, $14,000 off a Ford Expedition, $7,000 off the Ford Mustang Mach-E, all the models. Broncos, $10,000 off. F-250s, $7,000 off. So if you want the XLT or the Lariat, you get $7,000 off that one. $5,000 off the 2025 Ford Explorer. See, they're not trying to move as many 2024 Ford Explorers because they know the Explorer is a badass vehicle. Everybody's bought them all up. I have one, so I would say that. But $5,000 off a 2025 Ford Explorer. So check out all the promotions and deals over at Athens Ford. You'll be very glad you did so. And also mention our friends over at Your Pie because today is Wednesday night. Tomorrow is going to be everyone's going to get ready for the snowstorm. The snowmageddon is coming. Go ahead and order up a bunch of Your Pies. Go ahead and get the breadsticks. Go ahead and get the good pizzas and the salads and the sandwiches. Go ahead and stock up so that you have it on hand because you're going to not be able to get out for maybe a day or two. Of course, use it as an excuse. If hey, I don't know if we're going to get a snow, just say the snow's coming and go ahead and order a bunch of them. And cold pizza is still great pizza. And I doubt you'll let it get cold. You'll probably eat the whole thing. So check out our friends at Your Pie. There's 70 plus locations near you. Order on the app, get a lot of points, get a lot of free food. Check out Your Pie when you can. All right, Dane, I know we got a bunch of questions. We're just we haven't had a chance to really get together and talk about this, but to me, the portal editions, we've got a thread on our board that's almost 500,000 views, people checking on the portal stuff. I know folks have questions about the portal. They have questions about coaching. The season's over. It feels weird. I guess we get to watch these teams play in a couple nights. Not sure who I'm rooting for. I don't really care who wins at this point.
Roddy, I had some questions for you about the game because we briefly chatted on the post-game overreaction show. Yeah. But with just a little reflection of Georgia and Notre Dame, what did you come away from New Orleans thinking? Because you did have that pretty long drive back to Georgia.
What I thought would happen did to an extent. I didn't think that they'd be able to score much on Georgia's defense, and they couldn't. Georgia gave them a 13-yard short field slant route. Okay, congrats. They basically drove and got field goals, and they had a 98-yard kickoff return. So besides the short field and the kickoff return, they didn't score a whole lot. They didn't move the ball on Georgia's defense. I just didn't think they could, and they really didn't. They did at the end when they needed to get a bunch of first downs, and that was surprising. But again, they weren't playing to score there. They're just playing to get first downs. And it's a whole lot different when you're in 4-down territory. Pretty much that entire drive, you're just trying to get a first down, and you're playing like the game, you're putting it away. Different than, hey, we got to drive the field. We got to take some shots and score. What blew my mind was Georgia's size and speed advantage meaning nothing because the Georgia's offensive line and accessory blockers could not keep them out of the backfield. Now, there were times that they moved down, shot themselves in the foot. Georgia gets down to the red zone and coughs the ball up. That was brutal. The strip sack, again, 2 turnovers, 2 drives with the ball taken away. So Georgia loses about 13 points. You gave them 14 points. You gave them a short field and a long kick return, and you gave them 2 turnovers. If you told me that you're going to give them a 13-yard field and a freebie on special teams and you're going to turn it over twice, they're not going to turn it over, you're going to lose against a good team. And that's what Georgia had been doing all year. They'd been making mistakes like that, but they were still able to outclass everybody. Now, sometimes by the skin of your teeth, you're down, 2 scores to Florida? I mean, you're tied with Florida against a third-string Yale walk-on quarterback in the fourth quarter. You're down 2 scores to Georgia Tech in the fourth quarter. You're able to pull those games out. You have to go to overtime with your backup quarterback against Texas. I wrote in my column before the whole thing started, Georgia's been lucky at times this year, just eking it out on sheer talent, sheer big plays. Arian Smith's fumble recovery, just gutting it out for first downs, watching other teams messing up. This was the one time where all those mistakes couldn't save you.
Yeah, Lawson Lucky chasing. Was it interception or fumble where he pushed the guy out of bounds? Like, that would have been a touchdown, right?
Yeah, and the blocker celebrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was it. Just the crazy – you had all those things where you're a flawed football team, but you're still better than just about anybody you faced, even with the flaws. And this was the one time nothing – did Notre Dame ever have like a bad play? No turnovers.
That's the point of it. Like, they out Georgia. Georgia
they made no mistakes. Yeah. And like when Georgia went to Austin and played Texas the first time, Georgia turned the ball over 3 times. But they forced the Longhorns to turn over 4 times. So Georgia actually came out +1. They forced Texas they sacked quarterback. They had some they drove Texas crazy in the SEC championship game, even though they played with their backup quarterback. In other words, even when Georgia made mistakes against Tech, against Florida, they were able to overcome them because the other team would sometimes make mistakes. There were some bad throws in that Florida games like that. I get that kid hadn't played before. But my point is, this is a situation where the whole way back, I'm thinking Georgia had the talent to win that game. They made multiple mistakes. Notre Dame didn't. Notre Dame didn't kick Georgia's ass. Notre Dame didn't whip Georgia. Notre Dame didn't blow them up. Georgia gave them 14 points. Kirby Smart said so in the post game. He's like, we gave them 14 points. And somebody asked him another question. He's like, guys, it was 2 turnovers. We turned it over twice. They didn't turn it over. And I'm like, yeah. Play that game 5 more times. Georgia wins it 4 out of the 5 times. But they only have to win it once because that's the only game they've had to get up for all year. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't. Looking back, you look over the years and how many times has Kirby Smart taken those last 2 minutes or minute 30, before halftime, and he just ran the clock out, and everybody's booed him, and everybody's like, "What the hell are you doing?" And and now exactly, you're there, you're with a first time starter. I said they're going to run the clock out. I mean, they're not going to risk nothing here. You're within 1 point, and even if they come out and score in the second half, you're still 1 possession game. But then I thought they showed confidence in Gunnar Stockton. Probably a little bit too much confidence right there, but they showed confidence in him. I think Gunnar Stockton threw the deep ball very well. I was impressed with Gunnar Stockton. I think he had a slower release, a lot slower the release than Carson Beck. If you're comparing the two, it's like night and day. But I thought he threw an accurate football. I think Georgia did what they've done all year. They beat themselves, and I think they've done it all year. And they found ways to win most of those games that they played this year while playing, the turnover ball. And I think they've how many games they lose the turnover battle, and just this year as a whole, it had to be more than half of them.
They ended the season -1, so they had more turnovers than they had. They were negative in the turnovers.
So yeah, I think ultimately what beat this Georgia team, and I think it beat them in the last game. They can't run the football, and I think their inability to run the football is not Georgia football. Even if they have a strong passing game, even if when they had Stetson Bennett and you could beat teams by throwing for 350, or you could beat teams by throwing for 150, because you could sit and say, hey, I'm gonna run the football. They did it against Kentucky several times where they're just like, hey, we're gonna pack it in, we're gonna run the football right.
Remember how mad people were when it was like 16-13 or something?
But you had
Serious at that game.
they had no ability to run the football in any game except for Texas at times. Even you look back at UMass, they didn't have the ability to stack up and run the football with them. And I think that was the story of this Georgia football team. They could not. It don't matter how many bodies you put in up on the line, they couldn't run the football, and you couldn't count on them to get a yard at the goal line. You couldn't count on them to get a yard on 3rd and 1.
I mean, if they brought in their defensive end to be a fullback, sometimes you could. They punched in a few of those.
Yeah, they punched good, but it really as a whole.
But you had to go to a whole different scheme, man.
That their running game was just not there, and it forced Gunnar Stockton to be the guy, and in his first start, and he made some great passes, and offensive line didn't hold up, but he didn't turn the football over, and I think that was good. But I think that you got to run the football, and Kirby Smart's teams run the football, and it doesn't matter how it happens. Doesn't matter if you're getting to the edge. Doesn't matter if you're running inside. Kirby Smart's team has always been able to run the football, and that's where you win championships.
Which is why everyone's like, Mike Bobo throws a lot of screens. Yeah. guess why? Because that's the only way to get it out there.
But screens kind of keep those defensive ends from coming upfield, kind of keep sitting back a little bit.
There's a reason for it. It's not like it's the only fucking play he knows, people.
You're trying to have some kind of extension of the running game because you can't block nothing. Right. So
that's what he did. And here's the thing. One thing we don't know about Gunnar was, did he get him in the right plays? Because he walked to the line, you can check out of a play. We don't know how well he did that, or how well did they shift the protections when they needed to. We that's stuff that we won't know without being inside the building. But
Dan was talking about the ETN fumble, and I think that was a play where he's got to look at the line and be like, hold up, because those guys were just jetting to the line of scrimmage on that play. I mean, they timed the snap perfectly. They should have sit down and be like, but I don't know how much freedom he had. So, again.
And he was very discounted. I was down there. His cadence was different. It wasn't like, hey, we're going on 2 and let them tee off.
My linebacker looked like Bobby Boucher coming through the line.
There were times, though, they guessed right. I mean, because he was very different, very varying in his cadence. And the timing was different. But, boy, they got off the ball quick. So I give Notre Dame credit. But, again, I think Dane, you nailed it. They out Georgia by letting other teams make mistakes and then not making fewer. They played very conservative, and it worked for them. So
from 2016 to 2023, Georgia's Kirby Smart coach teams averaged 204 yards rushing per game. Now that varies up and down from there, but the average for that whole time under Kirby Smart has been 204 yards a game. This season, it was about 80 yards less, 124 yards per game. You're talking like a 40% drop in rushing production this year.
Yeah, and that's like, think about it. If it's 80 yards, that's 8 first downs, or at least that's probably at least 2 possessions, and 5 minutes additional of clock, maybe more. And
a whole lot less stress on quarterbacks.
Yeah, very true, very true. All right, I know you got some other questions, but let's bring up our friends over at myperfectfranchise.net. There is a quiz on the dog vent. I need to pin it to the top of the board. They do it every month. It's their franchise of the month. Where basically they describe a franchise and you try to guess what it is. What's funny is we'll see 5, 10, 15 guesses on one of these franchises, and people are guessing legitimate, accurate franchises, but they're not the one, because you're trying to guess out of 3,000 different franchises what it's like. So I think it's a brilliant tactic to show folks, what's involved in these, what they do, kind of what the startup costs are, and how much in demand these franchises are. And hey, if you guess it right, you get a free year of UGASports.com, which you can keep for yourself or give it away. So we appreciate the fact that Andy Ludecky, each month is giving away a year-long membership. And I charge him for that. I make sure he pays it. But it's a great thing that Andy does, and he can get you into a franchise too. And you don't have to guess. You can just tell him what you want to do, and he will come up with it. So I always appreciate what Andy Ludecky does. And one of our other sponsors, who it's very important to talk about these folks, they're Bulldog Snacks. Right now, you saw the Classic City Collective putting out a tweet, saying, hey, we don't want to be the ones breaking news, but we're trying to see if there's any more surprises. Georgia was able to retain a ton of its current players. One of the ways they did that was by having a very good war chest. We opened the show talking about how some of these donors went out and, they ponied up. They gave a lot of money, and Georgia's able to go out and get some very good talent out of the portal. But what's more important was Georgia was able to hang on to a vast majority of the guys they wanted to keep. They're still trying to keep a few. You could get Damon Wilson back unless he's committed somewhere in the next 15 seconds. But there's players that they wanted to keep. And I tell you, Georgia held on to a few of them by the skin of their teeth. Give a thanks to our friends at Bulldog Snacks because they signed yet another big check to the University of Georgia, where the proceeds of these Bulldog bars and these Bulldog chocolate chip cookies, they give a huge chunk of the proceeds to the University of Georgia's NIL arm, the Classic City Collective. They use that money to pay athletes, pay players. So you don't have to be one of those big donors who gives a bunch of money to go get Zachariah Branch. All you got to do is eat chocolate chip cookies, and part of the proceeds from Bulldog Snacks will go and help them out. So thank you to our friends at Bulldog Snacks. Check them out when you get a chance.
We'll get to questions from UGAsports.com, and this one is all over the dog. The initials, will Mike Bobo be gone? It's getting too quiet on that front, and I have asked in every thread that I possibly can.
I'll put it this way. I asked him point blank in New Orleans, are you going to retire? Now, he could be fired, and I will say I don't expect there to be a change. But then I don't know the mind of Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart's gone 2 years without winning a title. He might get rid of everybody. The idea that Kirby Smart won't fire Mike Bobo because they're friends is ludicrous. Kirby Smart will win, no matter what it takes. He's the way people romanticize his relationship with his friends and wanting all his buddies around. It ain't that romantic out there. He rips them a new ass every day on that microphone. He did it to Will Muschamp. He did it to Mel Tucker. He did it to Jamil Adai. He did it to Shane Beamer. He does it to Mike Bobo. He does it to everybody who's ever been through there. Working for Kirby Smart is tough. It is hard. He is a taskmaster. It would not shock me if anybody left. Matt Luke, for one, we saw him. He's like, I'm getting the hell out of here. He goes over to Clemson. It would shock me if any coach left on his own, nor would it shock me if Kirby Smart said, hey, you're not getting it done, or I want to go a different way. And you and I are best friends, but you don't mean more to me than Georgia football. You don't mean more to me than winning. This is my job. This is, I'm not going to put friendship above my duty. So the idea that Kirby wouldn't do it is ludicrous. Will he? Will he? I don't know. I kind of doubt it. Because I have a hard time pointing to exactly where he's going to look at it and say, yeah, this is the weak link. This is the problem that we had. Like you said, there's talent issues. There's execution issues. And people can say, well, that's on coaching. Okay, no, that is on coaching. So if the offensive line can't block, that's on Stacey Searles. If the personnel is wrong, that's on Mike Bobo. Well, why does it stop there? Why doesn't it go all the way to Kirby Smart? Why doesn't it go to Josh Brooks? Why doesn't it go to Jared Moorhead? And people have a sliding scale of where they want the responsibility to stop because they want to get rid of that one guy. And I'm like, hey, Kirby Smart's going to look at himself and go, what do I need to do better? So I don't know where he's going to come down, but right now I don't see it. A lot of people want to see Stacey Searles gone. He's out on the road recruiting. Although we've seen guys get fired on the road, it doesn't mean that being on the road doesn't mean you're safe. But right now, I just don't see the same desire from Kirby Smart to make the change that I see from the fans. And I asked Mike Bobo, are you going to retire? And he said, I have no plans to retire. Now, he could have been lying to me. The way he addressed it, he would have to be a great actor. because he seemed stunned that I was asking. Maybe he was stunned that I found out ahead of time. It didn't look that way. He just could not believe that it was a real thing that people really believed was out there. So
Well,
I
don't know what's going to happen with coaches, but I can tell you that it's been quiet because, number one, you don't do none of this stuff during the portal. You don't do none of this stuff during transfer season, where then you got to go make your job harder and explain all ins and outs. And it's not saying that they hide anything from these players or hide anything from these recruits.
Yes, they do.
but they're not. That's the nature of the college football game. You it's better to explain later and get them in rather than have to beg them or explain to them while you're trying to get them in. Get them in and then make it better. And so you're not going to hear it. And also he's coming off the fact that his dad died. So you're not going to, but with those two things working hand in hand and transfer portal just closing for Georgia's window, he's been in meetings with players, been in meetings with parents, and that stuff's the least of his concern at this point. I mean, you're a long ways away from playing a football game. All that stuff.
He's got all next week. He's got weeks and weeks.
That stuff's going to be addressed, and he meets with every player, and then he probably meets with every coach. So to go over evaluation of the season. So that stuff probably hasn't even happened yet because he's been dealing with all this player stuff. So that's the reason why there's been a quiet on that front.
Yeah, a lot of people want to have right away. To your point, you mentioned that Trevor Etienne's coming back. Has he announced that publicly?
I don't think so. I don't think.
Here, and I put this on our board yesterday because on that same thread where we talk about all the transfers, I said keep an eye on the running backs. I expect Trevor Etienne is coming back, but I don't think we're going to see an announcement on that until the portal is closed. Basically, the idea being if he's coming back, they could say, hey, hold off on that. You don't need to put that out there. Let's wait till after the portal's closed. Then you say you're coming back. So, same with Dalen Everett or going and signing a defensive back. Let's not scare off Ellis Robinson or Branson Robinson or, this offensive lineman or this tight end or this QB. You've already lost Jaden Rashada. Let's not announce we're going to bring in 3 more quarterbacks. Let's not do any of this stuff. Let's maintain who we have, and then we'll add later after the portal's closed. And people can say, well, now you're tricking the kids. No.
They still have a spring window, but you get the opportunity to, evaluate them further going into the spring without something happening.
So it's the same right now. You're right. You don't. People are like, oh, the game's over. I'm so mad at Stacey Searles. Damn it, he needs to be fired. Kirby, do something. If Kirby does it today or if he does it in February, what's the difference?
No.
Well, and I understand just the name Bobo has almost become like what represents offensive issues, even if it's not necessarily like correlated to him. It's like whatever happens. And look, your quarterback that would have been a first-round pick regressed this season. Your offensive line could not establish a running game, even with some really good running backs. We know the receiver talent issues. We know Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey were NFL superstars. They weren't around Georgia this year. The things I'll say about Mike Bobo, one, you don't win an SEC championship without having an offensive coordinator that knows something. And then 2, after Carson Beck's midseason issues, where he's throwing interceptions left and right, and we're going on shows saying, look, I know Georgia's committed to this guy, and they gave him all this NIL money, and he could have gone pro, but like, do you have to think about benching him with the way that he's playing? And Kirby Smart hates turnovers more than anything else. The way as reckless as he was being, Mike Bobo getting Carson Beck to calm down, come back to his fundamentals, and have a good middle to the second half of the season. If that's not a good coaching job, I really don't know what is. To me, that's the job. These football players know how to play football. Carson Beck knows how to throw a football. Mike Bobo's job is to manage that personality, and in that case, he did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do the right play calls, get the right plays in. People say, well, they started, again, I'll put it this way. I asked Kirby after the game was over, the Notre Dame game was over, I said, your offense has not been good this year. What are your thoughts on that? Here's your chance to, throw your offensive coordinator under the bus or talk about what's going on. And Kirby said, we've also played the toughest schedule in my history. And to your point, you did it with Kirby Smart's thinnest roster in 5 years, 6 years. This was a super thin roster compared to what he's had in the past, facing his toughest schedule ever. And again, I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I'm just people asking, is there going to be a change? I'm trying to tell you point blank from what I asked Kirby Smart and what I asked Mike Bobo. Kirby Smart says, yeah, the defenses we played were very, very good. And if you throw stats at him, he gets pissed off because he's like, the stats don't matter. The stats will lie to you. Don't throw stats at me. Did we do the right things? Did we execute well? And you look at some of those, the first half of the Notre Dame game, you're driving the field. You're about to score a touchdown. Then you fumble it. Is he furious at Mike Bobo for that? Furious enough to make him kick him out, fire him? I just don't see it because Kirby's like, we shouldn't have fumbled. We were going to score, but we fumbled there. And I asked him, hey, why were you throwing the ball with 33 seconds left in the first half? That seems dumb. Are you mad at your offensive coordinator for throwing the ball with 33 seconds left in the first half when you're only down by 3 points? And Kirby said, no. I didn't quite ask it that way, but he says, when you were trailing in a game like this and you're not getting a lot of possessions, every possession counts. So we were going to try to go 2-minute offense there, and I will never apologize for being aggressive. Now, was he furious with Mike Bobo? Maybe, but he can override him. He could have told him, take a knee. We're not going for it here. We're damn sure not throwing the ball here.
Well, one of the issues with Georgia this year was lack of continuity, right? Just the position changes, new guys in new places, all that offensive line that doesn't really go with that, with the experience that was there. But if that was one of the things that determines Georgia's success, and if you think Gunnar Stockton is the next starting quarterback at Georgia, you want Mike Bobo to be involved with that because there's going to be no greater continuity than Bobo and Gunnar Stockton.
Maybe. And Kirby likes continuity, but again, Kirby they're guys he likes, and he's let them go. I won't get into it. I'll just tell you, the idea that he won't fire a guy because they're buddies is stupid.
I think the one thing that is overlooked, and Jared Wilson was a good center, but you didn't really need a offensive line coach the last 3 years with Cedric Van Pran. 4 years. I mean, he was the glue that kept everything together, and he was vocal. No, he was a captain. I didn't see. Was Jared Wilson the captain ever?
Tate Ratledge was that this year. Yeah.
But Cedric Van Pran was your captain for 2 or 3 years, and all the continuity leaves when he leaves. I might be reading that too much, but I think that's a big part of it.
I do want to stick on that. You had Amarius Mims. You had Andrew Thomas. You had Broderick Jones. You had Jamari Sawyer. You talk about those 204 yards blocking, running games. There were times where it's like, okay, we're going to run behind Broderick Jones, Darnell Washington, and Brock Bowers lined up in a wedge formation in a little triangle on that side. Who the freak could stop that? Nobody. You're going to have a defensive end, a linebacker, and a cornerback taking on those three, and you're going to run behind them with James Cook. Come on, man. So, lower personnel, tough schedule. Kirby is not going to be like, well, the thing that we need to change here is our coaching. Maybe he will. I just don't see it. But if he does do it, I'll be the first one to say, I told you so, because Kirby it's not about loyalty does not preclude or does not outweigh winning.
It makes me wonder how much blame did Kirby actually put on himself for the season? Watching how it progressed, watching the wide receiver core that he had, which was depleted, how much blame did he put on himself? And I know that the Rah-Rah situation and the Colby situation were not his fault, but he's looking out there and the talent at wide receiver was not good, and overall talent. And I think Arian Smith.
Well, if they caught it, it would have been good.
But those work hand in hand. I mean, Arian Smith is.
I'm with you. That's
world, but he is not a 70 snap player game. He's always been a gadget guy. I mean, he's always you can probably look at one of his games this year and he had more snaps than he had his whole career at Georgia. So it's hard to. But I wonder if Kirby looks back and be like, why didn't I do something? And now he is doing something. And now he is going to get these guys out of the portal. But he probably looks back and said, I put everybody in a bad situation, Carson Beck especially, by not going to get some guys.
He was super defensive of Carson Beck this year.
I mean, he was all he was.
We're not going to psychoanalyze him, but he was very defensive.
I remember halftime at Texas where he's like, well, I don't remember how it was stated, but he said, well, our offense is playing good. Carson Beck had thrown 3 picks at that point. And I'm like he was so protective of the offense this year. It was almost like he felt guilty in the
walking off the field at halftime in Alabama. They're down 20-0. He's like, we got to get a stop. I'm like, well, you ain't scored either. It's like, just true. All right, next question, Dave. We can talk about this all night.
Yeah, let's sneak in our last break, and then we'll rapid fire questions to end the show.
All right. I want to mention our friends over at Red and Blackwater because just as we were talking about the Bulldog snack folks, and again, Bulldog snacks, big checks. Next big checks will be coming from Red and Blackwater. And that's Red and Blackwater is sports water. You see the Gatorade water, you see the Powerade water, you see all the different waters in your grocery store, in your gas station when you go in. And this isn't like, glorified tap water. This is actually fantastic water. It's not, it comes from an aquifer. It has minerals in it. This is the stuff that you need to replenish your body, when you're working out, stuff like that. So next time you go to a gas station all over the state of Georgia, go ahead and when you go looking and see the, all the fancy waters, just go ahead and grab the one that says Red and Black. It's the same cost or less than all the others. It's fantastic. I love the top on it. It works great. And proceeds of that go towards Georgia's NIL efforts. The 2 guys that created this whole thing, they're very successful businessmen. They have a separate company where they help people with ad buys and stuff, but in 2 different fields. They're basically members of UGASports, and they were at a meeting where Kirby was saying, hey, we need money for NIL. They said, well, what people buy more water than they buy soda, so let's create a water brand where the proceeds of it go to Georgia. So that's what they did. They're doing it. They're not getting. I guarantee you, these guys aren't making. They're all self-funded. They're doing it on their own. They're not. It's not a big corporate entity behind it. It's 2 guys on the dog vent who are doing it. So help them out. Also, want to mention our friends over at Academia Brewing Company. They are. This is another guy who's a big Georgia fan. So next time you're in there, yell "Go Dogs" in Academia, and they'll all turn around and start barking at you because it's a great place. They have a great venue there. If you want to have a corporate event, it's a great place. If you just want to meet friends, I have somebody coming in. They were coming in Sunday. We'll see how the weather's coming. And I said, hey, we got to go to Academia Brewing Company. We'll try some great beers, have some great food. Tonight, they're doing it right now. They're having a sushi workshop, unlimited sushi, interactive class. They got free drinks. You learn how to roll your own sushi and eat it afterwards, and you pair it with a bunch of Academia brews. So that's what's going on as we speak at Academia Brewing Company. Sushi night. Learn how to make your own sushi. So they always have fun stuff like that going on at Academia Brewing Company. Check them out.
Let's try to go rapid fire through questions as we wrap the show. Here's some from Razor Ramon 24. Who's the starting quarterback next year?
Go ahead, Trent.
Arch Manning. No, I'm just kidding.
Troll.
I mean, obviously, if you look at it now, it's Gunnar Stockton. I'm interested in seeing how Ryan Puglisi, how he goes in the spring, but I would say Gunnar Stockton today.
I would agree with that.
I think it's going to be Gunnar, but I think Puglisi is going to be on his heels.
If the first offensive play of game 1 next season is a 3-receiver set, who are the 3 receivers?
Ooh, that's good. Got to have Dylan Bell, Zachariah Branch, and Noah Thomas.
And it's a wide receiver screen. All right, next.
Does Damon Wilson come back?
No.
What? Well, one says, what would the defense look like next year? That's a much longer than a rapid fire question.
Say that one for next week when we get Coach on there. Put a little mark in that one because that's a great question.
different.
Good offseason one.
I think they'll look a lot different than they have because they had a lot of defense linemen, but I think they'll be a lot more athletic.
Well, see, that's what makes me nervous because Georgia lost 3 of its 5 defensive backs to the NFL, and they actually had a good – those guys did good as rookies. But I was told, hey, they're going to be so much more athletic in the secondary this year. We won't have the same problems that we did last year. And I was like, great. Fudge. That did not work out well. Yeah, hey, Julian Humphrey, very athletic. Daniel Harris, very athletic.
We spent 20 minutes on the Bobo discussion. Are there upcoming coaching departures? Razor Ramon 24 asks. I would just say every offseason their average is around like 2 assistant coaches changing, whether they change jobs or they get invited to leave. And I would say on average that is going to fall that way again. I would say 1 or 2 position coach changes.
And it never immediately happens right after the game. So y'all, everyone looking for a coach change right now, it's not going to happen. Just give it time.
From Sumter Dog 1, what's the real word on why Nate Frazier went missing for a stretch after the Clemson game?
Did he go missing?
The only thing I can say is Branson Robinson was healthier by that stretch of the year. And so
there was probably some fumble issues at practice too. I mean, that with him having fumble issues at the game, there was probably fumble issues or blocking issues. But there was a reason behind it. But
okay, I know what you're talking about. I thought I was thinking
not like missing
more,
from the team, like not playing.
Yeah, I was thinking there's something much more ominous. What happened there was he showed when he could play, he couldn't pick up a blitz, he couldn't pass pro. And as we know, Georgia couldn't block. So it's like, hey, we can't let our quarterback get killed. So we're going to bring in guys that are a little bit more. But the idea was you saw what he could do. He carried you in that Clemson game. Again, not being able to pass pro, but you need to get him out there. So he worked on pass pro those weeks and got better and better. He's still not great at it, but the difference from game 1 to like game 7, game 8, night and day.
From Primetime Dog, your thoughts on the cornerback position for next year? Personally, I think Harris can improve up and down year. Experience matters. If Everett's returning, how would that affect Robinson?
Watch DeMello.
Swainsboro, stand up.
Keep an eye on DeMello Jones. He's really good. Ellis, I mean, I know everybody wants to see him. I remember one play that he had against when it was kind of a blowout. He turned around, knocked the ball down. Everyone got all excited. Like, that's how you do it. He is not playing the way Georgia wants him to. He's not playing the techniques Georgia wants him, that Georgia wants him to. And that's kind of held him up. DeMello's come in and been very moldable, and that will get you on the field. So Dalen Everett coming back would be huge. Georgia definitely needs him. Can Daniel Harris get better? Yeah. Teams have been picking on him, and sometimes you come out of that great. Sometimes it breaks you, but he definitely he got picked on a lot. He's going to have to learn to actually be more physical and learn to tackle. He's a liability in the run game. So
I think if Dalen comes back, you'll have an open competition for the other spot between 3 people.
Yeah. And I think, Ellis Robinson is definitely the most gifted physically, but you got to play it the way Georgia wants you to.
From WNI, will Georgia sign a quarterback from the portal that could compete as a starter? I do not think so.
Well, to me, if you're going to sign one, then you're signing one to be a starter. Well, I take that back.
If they were going to do that, then I think Mendoza would be here.
Well, when you get Arch Manning, I mean, he's going to come. He's not going to come in to back anybody up.
It's going to be bad.
I think right now, if you're bringing in a guy, you're not. It's going to be tough to bring in anybody of quality to be a Jaden Rashada. Come in to be our 3rd or 4th string guy. Maybe that Deshaun Purdy, who they were trying to get him. He reports to Florida tomorrow. They definitely wanted him, but that would be a guy who I could see coming in, even though he had started at Charlotte, that you're not guaranteeing a starting job. But when you were going after Fernando Mendoza, you were bringing him in to be a starter, to at least fight for the starting job. So there may not be any options out there. Maybe the San Diego State QB, but I just don't know that it's going to be tough to bring in a guy to just sit there. So there's just not that many names in the portal.
No, and all the good ones that you heard about, whether it's the Washington State quarterback or all those guys are off the board, and you didn't really hear Georgia involved with any of them. Even the Oklahoma guy went to Auburn. I mean, you heard his name, but Georgia was never really involved with a lot of them.
He'd have come to Georgia for less than he was going to get at Auburn.
He wanted
to come to Georgia for a discount, but Georgia's like, nah, we're not. No, we're good.
Final two questions were addressed to Coach Donnan, so I'm going to save those for next week when we chat with him. But I will leave y'all with this. Did y'all see who the Philadelphia Eagles signed today?
Probably Todd Monken, since it's a Georgia guy.
Lewis Seen.
All right.
The band is back together almost fully. Who they missing?
I guess Trayvon is down there in Jacksonville. Maybe he can sneak up.
Devontae Wyatt's and
in Green, but like Green Bay plays the Eagles this week, right?
That'll be full of jersey swaps.
Yeah, like when they take that picture together, you're gonna have Jalen Carter, you're gonna have Jordan Davis.
I need to get credentials to that.
Nolan Smith.
I only need to be here post game guy.
N'Kobe Dean, Keely Ringo, Lewis Seen. Who are the Packers guys? It's
Eric Stokes,
Bullard,
Wyatt.
Clay Walker.
Clay Walker. I mean, you're gonna have your whole 2023, 2021 defense.
Philly Dogs, man.
That's mind-boggling.
And then the Atlanta Falcons are, the Atlanta Falcons.
Shit.
Hey, they got Charlie Warner.
Do they still have John Fitzpatrick? Is he still with them?
Yeah, at one point they had two Georgia tight ends. I like that.
Yeah, they could have Brock Bowers too.
Hey, Blockwell.
Don't get me started on that. Hey, our condolences go out to the Smart family for the loss of Sonny Smart. That was a brutal thing that Coach Smart had to go through for that game. I did have some people say, "Well, why did he coach the game? Why did he go through it when his dad was in the bad shape that he was?" And I'm like, look, if you know that family, they're coaches through and through, and there's nothing Kirby could do sitting in the hospital. And Sonny Smart is a decades-long coach, in the state of Georgia, and he would want Kirby to go be with his team, his 135 charges, and not be there, just doing nothing in the hospital. So, but I was still very impressed that Kirby was able to get through that game and do his duty and coach as best he could, and come out on the other side and go back and spend time with his dad. And to lose him on that trip, it's just awful. So Sonny Smart, very well loved in the Georgia community, very well loved by the Bulldog Nation, and we send our condolences to the Smart family, because that's just a tragic thing. So our condolences to the family. We'll be back next week. We'll try to get back to the Tuesday at noon. Hopefully you all survive the snowpocalypse that's coming. We'll see you next week.